So we have folded and we have trimmed. We're now getting ready to sew. So I've got my stack of folded and trimmed pieces here, and I've got the stack of my number 2 pieces. Now let's pay attention to where these arrows are. This is the edge that we want to be lining up with the edge that we trimmed. So if we take the first one off the stack, and take the first one off the stack here, these 2 edges need to be lined up. Oh, before I get to that, now notice this piece of fabric is facing right side up. When we put piece number 1 on, we did right side against the window. That's the only one that goes right side down. Everything else goes right side or pretty side up. And that's because we're attaching it to this, which is right side down. We want right sides together. So always, always, always the new piece that you're adding is right side facing up. So we know that these edges, we want to line them up. But the question is, where exactly along here do we want to line them up? Now there's a little bit of leeway. You don't have to be absolutely perfect. So I've got a little bit extra on this edge here. I've got a little bit extra on this edge here. But I want to check and make absolutely sure that my area number 2 is going to be completely covered. So let's open this up for just a sec and talk about what all needs to be covered. So this is area number 2 here. But we not only want area number 2, we want the 1/4 inch seam allowance beyond it. Now, for all of the outer edges, this seam allowance is already shown on here. That's the dotted line. And this edge is where the fold is. That seam allowance is already accounted for. So basically, this area here plus the seam allowance beyond that line plus the seam allowance for the outside of the block. That's the whole area that we have to make sure our piece number 2 is covering. So let's mark where this point is and this point is. I'll just mark those with a pin. And I'm going to mark this point out here. So when I fold it back, you can see where those pinpricks are. And this is where I sketched that seam allowance line. And this is where the outer seam allowance line is. So this is the area that we want to make sure our piece is underneath. And now we can kind of check. So we need to come out at least this far right here. Well, the edge of that piece number 2 is actually all the way out here. So we're definitely good on that side. Over here, we need to come to this point, and this is where the end of that piece number 2 is, so we've got almost an inch there. And we also need to come all the way down to this point here. So if I put my thumb right on that point, I can kind of peel the paper back, and I can see that I still have about ½ an inch of fabric beyond that point. So I'm good. This is lined up nicely. Now normally I don't bother drawing all of this on the back. Let me show you what I normally do with another one of the pieces. So I know it's these edges that need to line up, and I'll just kind of lay it on so that I've got about the same amount extra here as I have here. I do want to make sure that the edges are lined up perfectly. And then I can see through the paper where the line is. Maybe have to check to make sure that I'm looking at the right line. There's a line here, and I know I need to come the ½ inch beyond that. So I'll just kind of go and, oh, well, I can see my fabric goes all the way out to here, so that's good. I can see the point there, and I know that my fabric comes out to here, and I can see through the paper this point here. So I'll just put my thumb on there, fold the paper back and check. Now this time I've only got about ½ inch extra, but that's enough. It just needs to go beyond that point. So this one is good too. Now when I do this lining up and checking, I'm normally doing this right beside my sewing machine, because if I'm filming it here on my cutting table just because it's easier to get the camera into position to film at the cutting table than it is right beside my sewing machine. But you know, I don't really want to have to pick this up carefully and move it over to sew it. I'd like just to be able to rotate the thing, open it up, and then proceed with sewing. So I will usually take my entire stack of 4 pieces and my entire stack of the piece that I'm adding. I'll take them all over to my sewing machine, and I'll do that lining up right beside, and then I can proceed with the sewing.